Now, Mr. Lukin, let me come to you first. Russia has been a central player here, although having done not much. What is the reaction from the Russian side to the very latest development?
Well, official reaction was that it has nothing to do with Russia, that the United States changed their officials, their bureaucrats. It's their own business. But what I can say, this was a diplomatic reaction, of course. What I can say as a private citizen, first is that Mr. Flynn was resigned, or had to resign, for allegedly violating the so-called Logan Act of 1799, which is still working. And this act says that any American private citizen cannot express his or her opinion about the policy of that country towards the United States in talking, or as it says, in correspondence with the government opinion of a foreign country. Well, this is an absolutely ridiculous law, because it forbids private people to discuss the political issues with a foreign representative. And this country, the United States, calls Russia, for example, an authoritarian regime. This is absolutely ridiculous, because it's a dictatorial law. If such a law existed in Russia, then half of the country would be in jail. And you get in the United States 3 years in prison for that. This seems very strange for me, to me.
Yeah, Mr.
And the second is
yes, please go ahead.
On the question of how yes, and on the question of how it can influence the Russian-American relations, I think, frankly, we don't know, because the policy of Trump's administration is not clear yet. We don't know who decides on on policy towards Russia. We don't know the people. Some people are not appointed. You know, we have for example, the Secretary of State, but we don't have Deputy Secretary of State. We don't have people in charge of policy towards Russia, and we only have words. Well, the words of Mr. Trump were nice towards Russia. I mean, he said that he wanted to improve relations with Russia. Who would be in Russia against it? Nobody. But he didn't do anything practical. Maybe he didn't have time, or it was not his first option. So we don't really know. We have mixed signals. For example, Mr. Flynn once said that he wanted to improve
Mr. Lukin, let me break you up here. Mr. Lukin, let me break you up here. You have already made two very interesting points. Basically, first of all, you think that it was a ridiculous law, whether Mr. Flynn violated it in the first place, but it was a ridiculous law. Harvey, what is your position on this question here? Because we're looking at two different questions here. First of all, whether he broke that law, and secondly, whether he lied about whether he talked to Russians or not. Harvey, what is your take on this?
Well, on the second question first, he admitted that he talked to the ambassador, and
but in the first place, he denied.
He denied it first, but he finally admitted it. And as a matter of fact, many people in the coming to be Trump administration talked to Russian officials about a variety of issues still yet unknown, which is troubling because they weren't in power. So I take issue with our Russian guest's initial comments. I think Michael Flynn has a dubious distinction. Number one, he was fired by President Obama when he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and now he was fired or asked to resign by President Trump. We have an expression in English. The expression is in like Flynn. But now we have out like Flynn. The expression in like Flynn means you accomplish something in a very short period of time. Well, he accomplished his resignation, but he's also known as a serial liar and a prevaricator. And in fact, when he was at the DIA, his staff called these made-up facts, these alt facts, Flynn facts, and he seems to have done it again.
But it's incredible that US President Donald Trump, while he was campaigning, while he was considering his cabinet, he would pick somebody who has a reputation like that to be his national security advisor, who would be really making some of the most important suggestions about the policies of that country. Was he not aware of all of the bad okay, people say bad people never think they're bad people. But again, somebody with such dubious background and reputation, was President Trump not aware of that?
I think he was definitely aware. I think it's part of his strategy that he announced last April, and that is to keep people guessing, which is a terrible strategy because governments need to have information and predictability in international relations. And I put this responsibility not only on President Trump, but President Trump's puppet master, Steve Bannon, a person who says that China and U.S. will go to war in 5 or 10 years. Bannon has a theory that the world is kind of coming to an end, and he's trying to do everything he can by chaos to hasten that.
Yeah. Mr. Lukin, let me come to you now. The whole thing about the controversy surrounding Trump, in my eyes, has been complicating the relationship with Russia. But what exactly are the Republicans and the media that Trump has been calling fake media, fake news? What do you think they're fighting against? Is this Russia or is this Trump?
Well, I still don't understand what's wrong with that. I teach diplomacy, for example. According to Vienna Convention about diplomatic activities, the job of any ambassador and any diplomat is to collect information about that country. So it's a job of ambassador to talk to people. And private people also have right in a free country to talk and discuss the policy of this country with diplomats. Only in the United States you get 3 years in prison for that. So why do you call this a free country? This is absolutely ridiculous. And to your question, it has nothing to do with specifically Russia. The problem is that Russia is only one of the points. The thing is that Mr. Trump was elected, and the majority of the establishment lost. Democrats lost, and part of the Republican Party, some Republicans, top Republicans, lost the nomination during the nomination campaign. And now they're fighting Trump because they wanted to somehow to get rid of him because the people voted for him, but they could not do anything at that time during the election, but now they want to keep up and still get rid of him. So it's an internal fight in the United States, and there will be more fighting. All press is against Trump. All the Washington establishment is against Mr. Trump. So he's having a hard time, and that's surely his defeat, but it has nothing to do with Russia. I mean, Russia is just a scapegoat. Not only Russia, Iran also, China is a scapegoat. There's a lot of scapegoats.
Harvey, what is your take here? Do you agree with Alexander there? And secondly, do you think we're seeing just the beginning of a developing story, something that could end up being another Watergate or bigger than Watergate?
I take issue with the professor, because yes, it's okay for ambassadors to talk to private citizens, but it's not okay under the Logan Act or by principles otherwise for private citizens who are about to become public officials to speak for or appear to speak for or maybe be seen to speak for an incoming government. So that's what the law, an ancient law, but one which has obviously stood the test of time, is there for. It's not to muzzle people, but it's to make sure that the government conducts the government's business, not private citizens. So that's that point. And yes, I think that this is a developing story. Trump would like to say that this is the end of the story because Flynn is resigned, but this is just the beginning. And Trump has succeeded in doing something that nobody's done in his administration, and that is getting Republicans and Democrats on the same side of an issue. And this issue is, to answer the question you mentioned at the opening, what did the president know and when did he know it? And also another phrase from the Watergate comes to mind: follow the money. So he's a deal maker. Let's see if any deals were made.
And there are many unanswered questions still hanging in there. I'm sure people will want to continue digging into that. At the same time, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is on his debut trip to Europe to attend important security meeting, and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is also heading to meet his European counterparts as America's top diplomat. Now, Mattis has strongly played down any impact Flynn's resignation might have on his visit. But do his European counterparts agree? Let me cross now to Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU-Russia Centre in Brussels. Mr. Cameron, thank you for joining me. Now, in Europe, what are people saying, how people are looking at this scandal here? Now, Jim Mattis says Flynn's resignation will not have any impact on his NATO trip. Are you convinced?
Up to a point. I think Mattis made very clear early on that America's alliances both in East Asia and with Europe were fundamental, so it was strong reassurance, and he also said that Flynn's resignation was not going to affect policy. But people here are just quite amazed at the chaos in the White House, and I don't think Flynn's resignation had anything to do with the Logan Act. It was quite simply he lied to the Vice President, and when you do that in your first week in office, you can't expect to stay in your position, so he had to go. And I think policy now is a vacuum in the White House. There are important officials like Mattis, like Tillerson, trying to keep some semblance of order, but the whole thing looks pretty much a shambles from European side.
Yeah, but exactly what do you think are the fundamental reasons leading to where we are, what we're seeing at this moment? He's just 3 weeks and 3 days into his presidency, and we have seen one controversy after another. What exactly happened?
Well, first and foremost, there's clear evidence of Russian interference in the elections, and that's going to be coming up pretty soon. It's documented by 16 different intelligence agencies in the US.
But we have not seen any concrete evidence on that as we were following the news. Well, I mean, you were talking about 16.
The Congress.
Yes, go ahead, please.
The Congress has seen the evidence, the so-called Group of Eight, and they're united, as you said, in a cross-party manner, calling for a full investigation, not just into Flynn's resignation, but the whole question of Russian interference during the campaign. And that, I think, will cause serious consequences for relations with Russia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser Cameron, joining us from Brussels. And you have been watching The Point here on CGTN. Well, as the fallout from the resignation of Michael Flynn continues to reverberate around Washington, questions remain unanswered about how much the president knew about what Flynn had been up to. Not only that, it appears that Trump is digging himself deeper into controversy practically every day of his presidency. Many believe this is just the beginning of a major series of crises the administration is facing up. Now, Trump was an outsider who won the presidential race. Until such time as he leaves the presidency, it is quite likely that the establishment will continue to have the knives out for him and are likely to fight him all the way through his presidency. Yet the fact remains that he was voted to the presidency by an electorate who had lost confidence in the political system. Yet again, we're left wondering about the future direction of American politics and the undoubted fallout it will have on the rest of the world.